For the Guam Waterworks Authority. And Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have three issues for this decision. The first is Resolution 25/FY 2021, and this is as requested. A joint resolution for GWA and GPA on requiring GPWA employees to be fully vaccinated against SARS-CoV-2 virus. The objective of this obviously is to address the recent surge in positive cases island-wide resulting from the proliferation of the Delta variant, and also to align collective protective health and safety measures with existing federal guidance, and to comply with OSHA general duty clause, which protects workers from serious and recognized workplace hazards even when there is no standard. We believe that the policy is, the board believes the policy is necessary and urgent to ensure that both utilities can continue their operations with no disruptions to utility service to the general public. This will affect all GPWA employees in all locations. There is no financial impact to this, and we anticipate that the mandatory vaccination policy will be required by October 1st, 2021. The resolution does not references a SOP or vaccination policy that aligns with federal technical guidance in the U.S. Department of Justice memorandum. We are in the process of drafting that. It's likely that there might be some slight differences between the two utilities in terms of their particular policy implementation, but the one common thread will be that it will align with the federal guidance and the DOJ requirements.
Okay.
Can somebody, what's the Department of Justice telling us to do?
They just, sorry, not that they're requirements, but they've issued a memorandum or
Technical guidance?
guidance stating that it is not a violation to require, not a violation of federal law to require the vaccination.
Where are we at in terms of numbers?
80%, 79.21 for us, and I think
84% for us.
And 21%,
unvaccinated for us.
So,
and how much of that is, has a valid in your estimate?
I think we've only had a handful of things that would be considered reasonable exemption for either disability accommodation or religious accommodation.
And the policy that we develop will take into account, that's part of the guidance, right? The request for accommodations on those grounds.
And after October 1st, and there's still some non-vaccinated employees, what's the plan?
Well,
So the draft policy we have would require employees that are not vaccinated after October 1st to be tested prior to the start of the new work week.
And what testing?
It could be either the PCR or I forget the name of the other one, but we didn't mandate a specific test.
Because
I believe we followed the executive order and the guidance from Department of Administration.
and have you made a decision as to who's going to pay for the test?
Well, the test would be hopefully free, but in our policy, we are requiring the employees, so for example, if you had a traditional work schedule of Monday through Friday, the employee would need to test on the Saturday or Sunday prior to the start of the work week. And if there's no free test available, then that cost would be borne by the employee.
By the employee?
Correct. But that, like I said, this is just a draft policy we have right now. It's still circulating, so it could change by the time we get to final version.
I mean,
no,
Tuesday, because you want us to act on this by Tuesday,
well,
right?
we want the resolution, we're anticipating that the resolution will be acted upon by Tuesday, but the policy itself, we will finalize after the resolution is passed.
I don't think it's premature on our part to start asking that question, because, you know, you have the whole month of September basically to try to put this in force, and hopefully prior to that.
I think what the governor did was gave the employees ample time for you to make a decision prior to the hammer coming down. I just want to know that we have a reasonable hammer to deal with, because I'm speaking on behalf of the people that are in our hospital right now. And I'll tell you right now, they're not vaccinated. Okay, I'm having a hard time dealing with that because you brought harm into our hospital and to our people. Now, if you're telling me that we still kind of decide, no. Make the decision before Tuesday on what action we're gonna take, and let us deliberate that. So, the way we, that's what we're asking you. So does that mean you want the SOP to be finalized by Tuesday?
So,
Because you've known about this for 3 weeks.
yeah, we have a process for approving the SOPs within the organization, and unfortunately, we can't just act on them quickly. There has to be input provided by the union, so we have to go through that process. So we've given a deadline of August 27 for the input.
So essentially, what we
Union members that are not vaccinated.
I don't have
Let's
that.
get down to the.
I don't have that number.
Tell me that kind of stuff, because that is gonna be a problem, I would tell you, in the schools.
But we still have to
You
follow.
can't sit here and pretend this stuff is not gonna affect you guys.
We're not saying that, sir, but what we are saying is that we have to follow the process that's in place for us to approve an SOP.
I'm telling you.
And the resolution contains what we believe are the guide rails. You follow the federal technical guidance.
What you're telling us, Miguel, let's just cut the chase, okay? Is, we can't do this on Tuesday. Let's wait till September or whatever time, because I'll give you ample time to put your SOP in place.
And you want it attached to the resolution.
Right. That way, we have a better understanding of what this process is supposed to be while we, count down the dates, right? Meanwhile, what I would like to know is what extra steps are we taking to get those unvaccinated employees vaccinated? Honestly, is there something attached to their paychecks? Is HR saying, please know what are we doing?
We have employee updates that go out every day, every morning to all the employees via email and our WhatsApp chats to all of our operational folks, encouraging them to get vaccinated. So I think, we've even tried to put together incentives for this with the Employees Association. That didn't really go anywhere. But we're still continuing to push as hard as possible from a management standpoint for getting everybody vaccinated.
Now, you're saying incentives, could be financial, could be, one of the biggest hits I know that they said was the governor gave out gas cards, and that actually worked. We can ask her to pay for the gas cards. Right? They have that kind of money.
Okay.
That's what they're capable of doing. So maybe, we get them in the loop and say, hey, you ordered us, as part of the order, can you help us pay for vaccines, something, right?
Okay.
I mean,
Commissioner.
this is excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Santos, because this is, you're asking some of the same questions where, on the one hand, as I read the way it's written, this resolution is us instructing management to go get a mandatory vaccination policy that aligns, and this is in the resolve, number 2. As I read it, the commission is saying to management that you shall immediately develop and implement a mandatory vaccination policy that aligns with federal technical guidance and U.S. Department of Justice memoranda. So I think what management was thinking is on Tuesday, we're telling them, go make this happen, subject to effective October 1, and without necessarily thinking that we might want to review it. But I'm with you. My initial reaction was, well, before I say, if all we're saying is go develop the policy, my next statement would be the commission gets to look at that policy before it actually takes effect October 1, right? Today, this month's meeting, we're simply telling management, go ahead and develop a mandatory, this is the words of management, a mandatory vaccination policy. And if that's your intent, I'm okay, just as long as something's in place in enough time before October 1st that, so maybe the question for us at 5 is, do we want to approve their mandatory vaccination policy or simply say, go do it, and we defer to management to design it? Because I think you're asking the other more important questions that, and I totally agree with you. If someone, whatever that policy is, if someone says, I ain't getting a shot, am I reading it correctly that it can be a condition of employment? But we can say, then you can't work here. Just like private companies are saying throughout countries and nations and states, and there are private companies that say you can't work for me without a shot. So is that what we're saying? Or do you anticipate that would be in the mandatory
policy?
vaccination
So the
policy
draft-
that management is contemplating?
Yeah.
The draft policy does contemplate progressive discipline in this, if they do not get vaccinated
And they
or
don't
refuse to test after the October 1st date. So if they
Then
don't
what?
comply, so if they're not vaccinated and they don't comply with the test, then they can't come into any of our facilities and they're on leave without pay. And then they are counseled, and then it goes to suspension and then to termination.
Okay.
So,
So you even have a process before termination?
correct.
But okay.
But
Okay.
like I said,
Commissioner
it's a draft
Mtalko.
policy and it's still going through the.
If you want to see it as part of the policy, we can take that route and not, you table this until we have it developed,
Okay.
you know, going through our process, or we could pass it on Tuesday and say, and just amend it to say subject to, the policy shall be subject to CCU's prior review and approval.
Okay, Commissioner Mtalko has a question.
So
Okay.
there's a certain amount that you already have confirmation that are vaccinated. What provisions have you taken for those that have already had COVID? Because, and Commissioner, you can help me understand this process, but if you've already contracted the disease and you've recovered, do they have the antigens, which would be similar to a vaccination? So those that have tested positive before and have recovered don't need vaccination? Because I think you should account for those that have chosen not to take the vaccination because they've basically had the equivalent of it by contracting it and recovering from it.
I don't think there's language like that or technical guidance that speaks to that.
But I mean, maybe we should inquire as to whether or not that applies, because if they've already, does it count as a vaccination? Because basically, that's what the vaccination is, right? You've given a dose of this, the COVID, and now it's one that you can easily recover from. Because I'm going to go ahead and speak for those that have chosen not to get vaccinated, and that's a personal choice. There's risk associated with getting vaccinated, and these employees have chosen to not accept those risks, and I don't understand how we can impose that on a certain segment of the employees. I struggle with that. I struggle with having to tell someone that they have to receive something medically that they have the right to refuse to do. And I think what we're saying here is saying if you go that route, then you're not going to be employed here. And or that could potentially be part of the policy, right? You haven't set that policy in stone yet,
The
but
policy, if you choose not to get vaccinated, then you just have to test every week before you come in to any of our facilities.
But if you refuse
So
to
if
be
you refuse to
tested,
do that, then you'd be subject to
Okay.
discipline.
all right. And the other side of the coin is if you make it a financial burden on them to have to pay for these tests themselves, then it becomes almost a disincentive, right? I mean, it's like, well, you're basically saying the same thing, right? If you're saying there's a financial impact to you, if you want to be employed here, you got to pay for this.
There's
So
no financial impact to getting the vaccine right now because it's free.
no, but there is a financial impact.
I think testing is free as well.
tests are free too.
The tests are currently free, so I mean, right? But I mean, the vaccination have risks that there's a reason why these
But it's not
people,
financial.
right? But there's a reason why some of these people have chosen not to get vaccinated, right? And we can't ignore that fact. There's a risk to it.
So I wrestle with
Okay.
the same issue, but where I come down is I'm concerned about the healthcare infrastructure being put at risk with unvaccinated people. They're the ones that are ending up populating, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the population related to hospitalizations related to COVID appears to be coming from unvaccinated folks. So there is an impact that we can help mitigate for our healthcare infrastructure, so that we give the best chance to our healthcare infrastructure on the island to survive a rash of COVID hits that require hospitalization. And so as I trade off between individual freedom and community, I don't know if it's responsibility or obligation, but just community awareness, I can appreciate that it's not against the law for an employer to say, if you want to work for me, notwithstanding your personal choices, this is my rules. And so the debate that I have here is it in the best interest of the ratepayers and the community for the employees of our utilities to not create any additional risk to the healthcare infrastructure by not getting vaccinated, because it appears, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to me globally and locally that the folks that are ending up in the hospital with the most adverse reactions to COVID and that require the most strenuous medical interventions are folks that are not getting vaccinated. And therefore, and so even though you have the personal choice not to get vaccinated, for that 20% that so far has chosen not to be vaccinated, first off, anyone can get COVID, vaccinated or not.
Right.
But for that 20%, if they get COVID, the stress they create on the medical infrastructure of the community concerns me. And that's why I'm more comfortable, if I had to vote today, I would say it's mandatory like many companies have. But I'm open to seeing what management determines, what are your options, and I think the big one is what happens if you refuse to be tested, right? Because you can refuse the vaccination, but if you also refuse to be tested, then you put co-workers at risk, and you could create stress on the medical infrastructure, which, while it's not the CCU's job per se to worry about the medical infrastructure, I do worry about it, just because I'm from Guam, and I worry about it, because I could get sick, and I need a hospital bed, and it's occupied by someone that has COVID, that could have been either mitigated the need to go to a hospital by getting a vaccine, or not even ended up in the hospital, taking a bed away from someone who has to be in that hospital. So I wrestle with the same thing, but that's sort of how I come down with it.
Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, the resolution as I was reading it here, if we can just focus on where it says therefore resolved, and where it says number 2 there, that management shall immediately develop and implement a mandatory vaccination policy that aligns with the federal clinical guidance of U.S. Department of Justice, and I also want to include the governor's office policy. This is a directive.
Executive order?
Yes, executive order. But I think this could be brought on Tuesday, but only approved on the development of that mandatory policy. And then when you're finished with that, we bring it before the commission, and the commissioner will look at what we have, and we move forward with what's being presented. I mean, we could debate all day here about who should be relieved or dismissed or whatnot, but put those things in perspective, so when it comes to the table for the final voting, then I would know how to go about that process. So I just want to express that.
Okay.
So,
Miguel,
sorry.
you wanted to say something?
Just a question on your statement, Commissioner Martinez. So you want us to immediately develop, but not yet implement? So just develop a mandatory vaccination policy that aligns with the governor's executive order, federal technical guidance, and U.S. Department of Justice memoranda for CCU approval?
Sure, so we can address those questions that are just brought up by the 3 gentlemen here.
I see.
What
Okay.
happens to this, what happens if I don't want to get a shot? It doesn't tell me anything.
Right. Okay.
So if you put that on the table, at least we have something to.
To look at.
Okay. Commissioner Ntafu.
Mr. Chair, but just to clarify, we need to determine, those that have tested positive and have contracted it and have recovered from it, whether they're included in the vaccinated So I don't know who that right person is. Maybe it's the governor's health advisor, Dr. Nguyen, I think, is probably the one to make the decision. But if the intent of the vaccine is to provide the antigens that you would otherwise get from contracting it and recovering from it, I don't believe that those have already contracted it need a vaccine. But we need to get that clarification.
Okay, Commissioner Sanchez.
So what I'm hearing from Commissioner, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding, from Commissioner Santos Martinez and I think myself, no one is objecting to the idea that management should develop a policy. I think I heard Commissioner Martinez to say that he would like a chance to review that policy before it's implemented. I like that idea. And so my thinking is, if we don't need this resolution to tell management, go develop a policy, because this isn't what's important to us. What's important to us is what is the policy, right? And you've already taken, it sounds like you've taken great initiative to the credit of management to try to figure out a policy. You're developing it now, you're talking to stakeholders, you got a process, but it's not ready for the CCU review on today's date. And it may not be ready by Tuesday, but we're giving ourselves that we wouldn't implement it till October 1st anyway. We do have another meeting next week, and the chairman can call us into session, with appropriate notice anyway at any time, and to deal with it.
So then,
So-
maybe it would be
But
best
just to
table
be
it.
clear, I am,
Just ignore it and develop the policy
Just-
and bring us a policy for approval at the next
Okay.
meeting or as soon as possible.
Commissioner
but just to clarify Commissioner Sanchez's statement is that,
One issue that you've raised about the question of not just tested, vaccinated or not vaccinated, or if they have already contracted the illness, that we should recognize that that's also, we should recognize that in the policy, that that's another way to be, I guess, vaccinated, in effect.
right, but just to clarify, I am in objection to a mandatory vaccination policy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're not all in agreement on that, yeah.
Okay,
So I have a question. The current practice for unvaccinated is they have to wear masks, are you segregating them?
everybody's wearing a mask.
What is the current practice?
There's no segregation.
Do you plan to segregate as part of your policy or recommendation for those employees that do not want to be vaccinated? How are you protecting yourself? You're vaccinated. What's your protection?
To answer your question, the policy doesn't contemplate any segregation. It's just that you would be tested prior to the start of the new work to determine if you were positive or negative.
I don't want to use the word science. Science is not behind that. You can be alive to the end, walk off this room, fall flat in your face. So I'm telling you, the virus doesn't discriminate. I don't care if you're, when a elementary school kid and a middle school kid, that's exactly what's happening. Didn't discriminate. So I'm gonna ask again, do you have any contemplation on how to segregate vaccinated people with unvaccinated? What precautions are we gonna take? I'll give you the precaution we take. You're gonna wear a mask, and, you have to be careful where you go.
Okay.
You're not allowed, I hate to say it, you're not allowed to roam.
Aren't those policies in place so now, masking of?
Masking, full masking, whether you're vaccinated or not, everybody's got to be masked
okay.
within the facility. And
What about the
other
social
people-
distancing? We're still doing social distancing or just
No.
masking?
I don't think for the facilities we're doing social distancing, lunchrooms are open, the chairs are in place.
Mm-hmm.
These chairs are not 6 feet apart anymore, so,
Mm-hmm.
that we thought aligned with the current guidance.
And that I can tell you is well, hopefully, the governor listens and shuts that down. Because that was one of the recommendations last week, was to basically take us back to a reduced number. Because every virus contraction has been linked to an event. Not counting the schools. The schools, we're just waiting to start the number count because they already.
Got 7 hits yesterday.
Right, yeah, it's gonna happen because it's just gonna happen.
currently not contemplating doing that.
Okay. I have a thought, by the way. I've listened to all the discussion, very good discussion, but maybe on the second resolve, we shall have GPA management shall immediately develop for implementation a mandatory vaccination policy. And that way we can address the resolution at Tuesday night's meeting, and we can take up the actual policy at the work sessions that are coming up, if not sooner.
The September work sessions, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's just my thought.
And all I'm saying is, it seemed to me that the commission was comfortable with the development of a policy.
Yeah.
And really, that's all this resolution says. What we're more interested in is, what
What's
is the
the
policy?
policy? And
I'm
that's,
saying you don't even need this resolution. I think we've made it pretty clear at the work session that the body is okay with the fact that management is developing a policy, but wants to review it in the September meetings. And I'd just get rid of this.
but I think it's good that the board adopt this resolution directing management to develop the policy, so that there's no confusion with the employees that, oh, this is just what management wants.
That's fair.
Okay? But again, I would stress that I think this would work, is if you just change this to develop for implementation a mandatory valid, in other words, this resolution tells you to develop it. We can add another sentence that says, and at the work session for GWA, GPA, we will adopt the policies.
And maybe just add subject to CCU approval.
Or subject to CCU approval, something like that.
I mean, you may call a special meeting.
Yeah, we can
maybe it's
do
at the
that, we
work
can do
session.
that, but what I'm
But
saying is we
your
have
intent is
time.
carried out, just.
Yeah, and we have time, that's my point. We can do it at work sessions. Okay? So that's a lot to think about. Talk it over, because these are gonna mirror, right? John's policy is gonna mirror your policy.
So what we were thinking was that, at least, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not getting the semantics right, but the policy is, it's gonna be mandatory vaccinations or you face testing, right?
Okay.
That's the policy.
Or
The details of
testing.
how we implement that is a procedure. So normally they're packaged as a policy and procedure. This was to be the policy, we were to develop the procedure.
Right.
Right? And it sounds like you don't want to act on the policy until you see the procedure. So my recommendation would be table this resolution. We will bring it back to you amended and revised to include a proposed policy. And at that time, you can approve both together at the same time.
Maybe it's semantics, but when you bring us the actual policy, that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's why I'm saying, I don't even think we need this resolution. Management is informing us that they're developing a mandatory policy, and you're gonna bring it to review, but I'm sensitive to the chairman. If he wants the body on record, I can see that side of the equation.
Yeah.
But at the end, where the rubber meets the road is when you walk in 2 or 3 weeks from now and say, here's the proposed policy.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I just
Right,
said.
right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, I don't even, whether we need this or not is
I think the chairman's right, though,
just to set the
that we're
policy.
giving employees, the CC's focus.
Right,
And
right.
authorizing that.
And-
Then I'm okay. Then I'm
And instructing management to do this.
okay. I'm set for
So,
Tuesday.
so we can do this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay?
Hope you know what we're doing these days.
Okay?
I think on Tuesday, you're gonna drop number 1, and you're gonna have a policy. Or it's gonna say, subject to CC approval, and in September, we'll have a policy.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Yep.
my only one guidance is, it has to mirror both GPA and GWA, okay? Because you work in one building. You guys are
Yeah.
interconnected.
Isn't it a
So,
joint resolution?
well, I
It's
don't
a joint
know.
resolution.
It's a joint
Yeah,
resolution?
GW and GP.
I'm asking.
It is.
Oh, yeah, it
It
is.
is.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I didn't
It's a
see.
joint
it.
resolution.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify,
Any-
we would present this at the next work session next month, correct? Because we still need to get input from the union on, and they have a deadline of August 27th.
I think what we're hearing from Commissioner Sanchez and the chairman is that you're going to present this at the actual CCU meeting this month,
And we'll
Yeah.
approve it.
yeah,
And
for
we'll-
the
So then you guys
policy.
have cover That
And you go,
management has been instructed
and you
by
go
the
do the
board.
policy.
But we would be in violation of our agreement with the
But
union
just-
if
No,
we
we're
don't
just-
allow
Just
them
No,
to
no, no.
have-
Not the details.
Not the details,
the
just the
details.
resolution.
Not the
So we
details.
still move forward with what's
The
required to
resolution.
do.
Because all this says is you'll develop
Amend the
a policy.
resolution.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the policy attached to it. That's not gonna be read by Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree with the general manager that the policy has to precede the actual, the
procedures.
The policy has to precede the procedure, the actual
Right.
detail of the procedure. So I think that's what we're hearing from the commissioners.
That's what we're
That
writing up. The
you're
policy
gonna,
now is you guys go develop,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to
Procedures.
say. Okay. Okay?
and then we'll see what it says.
Can I just ask, what's the union's objection?
We don't know that they have any. We
They're-
just have to go
they're-
through the process.
there's a procedure on they have to follow a process to develop the procedures.
And they're
right?
not sure what the response will be, that's all.
Which includes discussing with the collective bargaining entities?
For those employees that are represented.
Yeah.
In the collective bargaining agreement, GFT has a member that sits on all of our SOP committees that develop and give input to all of these policies.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Next.
moving right along.
That was the easy one.
Yeah.
So next up is Resolution 26 FY 2021, and this is relative to the adoption of an interim fiscal year 2020 operating budget. And Colleen will walk us through it.
As the commissioners might recall, back in April, the CCU approved GWA's update of its five-year financial plan. And in that plan, it included the operating budgets for FY '22, '23, and '24. Subsequent to the CCU's approval, we submitted the plan to the PUC on May 1st and anticipated that the PUC would act on the filing prior to the
First of
new
October.
fiscal year so that the rates could be put in place in October. And originally, the scheduling order anticipated that that would likely happen. However, we were recently approached by the PUC ALJ, and he indicated he'll be issuing a modified schedule, which would likely mean that the PUC will not act on the filing until after the fiscal year begins. And so we are asking the CCU to approve an interim budget, which is basically a rollover of the FY '21 budget until such time the PUC acts on the rate filing. So, Ann just passed out
Comparison.
a copy of the FY '21 operating expenses that was contained in the CCU approved budget and the operating budget expense budget that's included in the rate application model. There's a difference of about $5 million. The CCU had originally approved in FY '21 a budget of $89 million, and the budget in the rate model is $94 million. So the resolution approves the FY '22 budget at operating revenues of $113 million, operating expenses at $89 million, and FTE level of 400 until such time the PUC acts on the rate filing. And it also includes the typical 10% transfer. So, happy to
Commissioner
answer any
Sanchez.
questions.
So I just want to make sure, Tolling, I'm following you. In the handout that was passed out by Ann, there's the column FY '21 annual CCU approved with the red asterisk.
Yes,
And you're asking us to approve this particular budget, right?
yes.
With, and I know this is the spending side you had mentioned, or I'm sure the resolution mentions the revenue side, oh, the 113? There you go,
113.
okay. So, and this allows you to function past October 1.
Until
And
such
the PUC
time.
will decide what they decide, and we can adjust the budget accordingly depending on their decision. So, okay. And so I understood that's your request before, okay. Keeps them going.
Okay, Commissioner Mchako, then I have a question.
Yeah, and telling does this take into any, to account any of the CARES Act funding or the, I know that we've mentioned this in prior CCU meetings that, we were to go out to the governor and see where some of these dollars can be contributed, based on the CARES Act. I'm not sure if I'm citing the right, is it CARES Act or?
Rescue Act.
Yeah, some of this additional funding that does not take into
No, it's
account
not
any of
taken
that?
into con-
Have there been any commitments by the governor on these funds?
So the governor has reacted favorably to the request, but there has been no official drawdown of any funds.
Mhm.
So we don't have them in our hands. But there was an indication that the 14.4 that was requested would be made available to us.
14.4 million?
14.4 million.
For FY '22?
And remember that the request was that those funds would be used in our concept to be put into the rate stabilization fund to be recognized as revenues in subsequent years so as to offset needed rate increases, to mitigate the rate increases.
And so it's possible, depending on what the PUC decides, that sometime after the beginning of FY 2022 and confirmation of the actual funding that might be available from the governor, we would revisit the FY '22 funding and source of revenue, whether rates or governor or combination thereof.
So,
And again, we can always change that budget once we have that. We're missing two pieces of information, what the PUC might do and what the governor might do.
so we think we're clear on what the governor will do. The question is, the still unknown is what the PUC is gonna do, but what the PUC may do will also depend on how we're able to utilize the Rescue Act funding. Meaning to say, the mechanism by which we receive the funds and put it in the right places in order to recognize it as future revenues to mitigate the impacts, all of that mechanism still needs to be worked out to make sure we're in compliance with the indenture requirements and other requirements. So, including the requirements that are attached to the money that we get from the Rescue Act funding. So those are still a lot of missing pieces, details that need to be worked out, and we're trying to sort through that now. It's, for lack of a better word, one hot mess until we can get a little more information.
But the thinking is that, at least according to Tolling, that the idea is that for now, we would adopt a budget with revenues of 113 million and spending of 89,646,000, or as summarized in the resolution, it's just 89 million, right? We would adopt that now or Tuesday, which gives management direction. And then, subject to these variables, the PUC decision, possible assistance from the governor, it can come back to us once we know with more certainty what those decisions are. We can always modify the revenue estimate, the spending estimate. It depends on what these other players do and how they may assist GWA or not, depending on their decisions at the PUC and at the governor's office. And as you pointed out, even the governor's proposed transfer may have, requirements to it that just come with the nature of the federal funding source that is providing it. Those all will get fleshed out, but at least for this month, the request for management is to approve this interim budget so that we can keep functioning until these decisions get made, right?
Okay, I have a couple of questions real quick. What's your current debt service?
1.35.
No.
Not the
No,
coverage.
what's the actual debt service that you're paying out?
I think I have that.
Okay, the reason why I asked is I think, and I could be wrong, but I think your debt service goes up in 2022. So there's an amount, you know, to me, this is, this takes out your depreciation, which is great. But your debt service, the amount of your current debt service, what you're paying on the bonds, I think there's a bump up sometime in 2022.
Which was adjusted in the rate filing.
No, I addressed in the rate filing, but if you're just rolling over your budget for 21, okay,
It won't hit until January and July.
yeah, in 2022. So it's going to be in your 22 fiscal year. That's when the increase goes up for January and July, right?
So.
No, I was just asking a question. So
I'm just trying to work backwards from the date that we borrowed, which was May of 2020. So it'd be 2 years cap I. So 20 is covered, 21 is covered. It would hit in 21, but it would not hit until, sorry, 22, but it would not hit until.
well, all I'm saying is, can you let me know,
Sure.
let us know that on Tuesday night? Because that, to me, is the one piece I don't see, and I just want to make sure we're okay. Because, you know, one of the things, I don't know, Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I always remembered is, listen, most of these rate increases are driven by debt service.
But cash.
Yeah, we're building cash. I mean, your personnel expenses aren't really moving like that. You know, I mean, I don't see huge increases in your personnel expenses, but the debt service is the thing that's driving this train. I mean, right?
So
Am I right, or?
Would it be, can you do this by Tuesday? Simply add, so I noticed you took out the depreciation, but just add what the principal debt
Yeah.
service would be, right?
Yeah.
Because I assume that's in that, I assume from a cash flow point of view, that you need 89 million. And that 22 million in depreciation, I bet, is helping you pay the principal portion of your debt service, right?
Yeah.
But I
I'm just
agree with the
saying-
chairman, as we know, all the rate cases are all cash driven. So you subtract depreciation, you add debt service, maybe just to help the body, let's put
Yeah,
that in.
I just want to make sure that we're
True
not
cash.
affected in 22.
Yeah.
If it's hitting in 23, okay, you know, that gives us time for the PUC to act, and hopefully they'll act and give us the 3 remaining years and not just give us
Right.
1 year.
But as Miguel just said, some of it hits in 22, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
That's
so
why I
whatever that
asked.
number is, and I know it's in your rate case, whatever that number is in your 22 rate filing.
Yeah.
You know, we need this much
You
rate
don't need
cover
to
this
answer
cash.
now. I'm just saying for Tuesday night.
Just
could
add
you- Can you put it in, okay?
So
That's
that way
all.
we know that, and then we're approving that budget
And we're
Tuesday.
approving that budget
It's
anyway.
yours to
Yeah,
go forth and manage.
yeah, okay? That's just the one piece I didn't see.
That's 27 million.
Okay, next, what else, or are we done?
No,
We're not done!
the last one is
Is,
Resolution 27 FY 2021, and I'm sad to say that this is something we're bringing back because we made a mistake on previous resolution 14 FY 2021, and this is in regards to the aligning our overtime policy with the Fair Labor Standards Act. We had a typo in the resolve clause that referenced a previous resolution, so we need to correct that.
okay,
And then, with regard to Appendix A and the positions, we didn't indicate that the GM would be authorized to amend that appendix when they're, both positions are created that are both exempt and non-exempt. I think we only had one, so we need to correct that.
okay.
And then a couple other things that have come up since you passed this resolution was, and this, a good example was what we were going through just in the last 24, 36 hours with respect to is the rack going to be activated? And are those employees who are typically exempt, they're the ones who staff the rack. And so, you know, those guys, based on the requirements of the rack operations, you're stuck there for 12 hours or sometimes 24 hours at a time. And so you're sleeping there. So what the policy didn't really take
Address
that
that.
into account.
Okay,
And then the final thing was that we have several, and I thought we could resolve this just based on the technical guidance that is offered by Department of Labor, but we have working supervisors who, and I'll give you an example, the pressure line unit, when there are main breaks. We have a supervisor who, because of his title, is exempt, but when, we have multiple breaks, he has to get into the ditches and work, basically do the work that everybody else does. And it is a difficult thing to do that and then to not receive appropriate compensation, especially if you're pulling a 16-hour day. So there is guidance from the Department of Labor which references blue-collar type positions and working supervisors, but there are several triggers, I guess, or tests that go along with that guidance, and for most of the work, these folks in the supervisor positions in operations don't meet all 4 of those tests, and therefore they are classified as exempt, which seems a little bit unfair given the circumstances regarding when they have to work as a guy in the trenches. So we inserted in the resolve clause something that gives the GM a little bit of flexibility in those circumstances, primarily to make sure that I have enough people who can address operational emergencies like that. And those are the amendments that we were talking about and that are included in this.
Okay, Commissioner Mchako?
So we're veering from the guidance on the Fair Labor Standards Act testing criteria. We're empowering the GM to make that decision as opposed to following the Fair Labor guidelines.
For the situations where there are emergencies, where the test would be met, but then during their normal workday, the test wouldn't be met.
More like an exemption, right?
But why is that working its way into the resolution as opposed to the typos? I understand the issues with the original resolution, but it's almost as though we're adding on to this opportunity by addressing this issue as opposed to it wasn't addressed in the original resolution?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Well, it was germane when we addressed it the first time.
But my mea culpa, we didn't think about that and I didn't include it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'll have some
Thoughts?
comments on the regular meeting regarding it.
Okay. That's it for the issues.
That's it for the
that you're-
resolutions.
yeah.
Management report, there's nothing significant. If it's the pleasure of the board to kind of gloss over that or not even go through it and just peruse it at your
But
pleasure.
no, nothing to, steady she goes?
Yeah, nothing outstanding, but we did have one other issue for discussion that is an issue that's kind of perplexing to management, especially in light of the rate case and the delay in getting the action on the rate case. So we did have that come up, also in reference to compensation. So if we could go over that, at least present
Sure.
the slides to the board.
What page?
50, sorry, is it 35? On the board? Oh, it's not on the
Oh,
board?
it's not in the
It's not on board books?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no
Okay,
problem.
okay. I mean,
So. Sorry, so this, just to give you background on this issue, the pay for performance, I'm sure you're all familiar with, allows for compensation adjustments of 0 to 4%, based on the performance evaluations every fiscal year. So typically, pay for performance, for example, fiscal year 2020 would normally be paid out in fiscal year 2021. We're approaching the end of fiscal year 2021. However, they would normally be paid out, but fiscal year 2020 was not a normal year, as we all know. With the pandemic, we had the government shutdown, public health emergency, change in the work patterns. Many of our employees adjusted to teleworking if they were non-essential, and those who were essential for a period of time received 2 times pay during the emergency in accordance with our personnel rules and regulations. As a result, our actual payroll expenses were higher than what we had budgeted, 1.02 times higher, and we paid out 1.03 million in emergency pay due to the public health emergency, and then 503 in CTO, also due to the public health emergency, and that was just sort of a cash management exercise on our part. In addition, during 2020, we've estimated the impact to our revenues as a loss of 10 million. And we, as you know, have been in cost containment mode since March of 2020. So all of this sets the background for how management should move forward, or what they're considering in moving forward with the pay for performance for the fiscal year 2020. So some of the actions that we've taken, as I mentioned, the cost containment, which we've presented to you. We've advised the credit rating agencies and the bondholder credit analysts that we were undertaking these cost containment strategies in order to make sure that we met our indenture coverages. We've also mentioned our cost containment to the EPA and DOJ in our discussions regarding the consent decree negotiations and fines and penalties, as you know. So the deferral of these, it also has resulted in deferral of some operational expenses and certain maintenance activities in alignment with our cost containment strategy. In February of 2021, you passed Resolution 11 FY 2021, which allowed for 11.6 million to be deposited into a rate stabilization fund if we needed to, in order to make sure that we met our bond covenant of the 1.25 times debt service coverage ratio. If you recall, we were concerned that with the loss in revenue, we may not be able to make our coverage, and we might be in technical default, and we obviously wanted to avoid that in order to keep our good credit rating and show fiscal responsibility. So the performance in our finances through July of 2021 indicate that even with the rate application that we submitted in May, we had to project out the end of the year. Our performance to date, if we annualize that and project it out, we are likely now having a few more months of data come in. We will have a $4 million shortfall below what we projected our FY21 revenues to be. So how then, given all these factors and issues, do we manage the pay for performance program? There are financial management policy implications, there are HR and employee relations implications, and we've developed for the Commission's discussion 4 different options and kind of outline what the impacts would be. First option would be to cancel FY 2020 pay for performance, given that the revenues have not been there. Everybody's done great, and it's been a difficult year. However, there was a lot of emergency pay paid out one way or the other, which did increase our payroll expenses over what was budgeted. The second option would be to defer payments to some future date when our cash flow improves. The third option would be to pay it out in fiscal year 2021, and there are consequences associated with that. And then another option would be to defer the payments and use the funds that would have been available for pay for performance to fund operational expenses, which we are still struggling with as part of the cost containment. So given these 3 options, the relative impacts to the two critical issues, debt service coverage ratio being one and then cash being the other. Option 1, if we cancel pay for performance, then we avoid a negative 0.02 times impact to the debt service coverage ratio. So if our target is if we end up finishing the year at 1.25, but we pay it out, then that would put us at 1.23 just as by way of an example, which would be below the bond indenture, right? So that's, and then the impact on cash, if we cancel it, would be that we would be about $485,000 better off. Option two, if we defer, we would take the hit with regards to the debt service coverage ratio, but we would still be $485,000 in cash better. For option three, if we pay it out this fiscal year, we take the hit on the debt service coverage ratio, and then we have a negative impact to cash of $485,000. And then if we defer to a future date and then also use the funds for operational expenses, then we take the hit to the cash, but we double the impact to the debt service coverage ratio to a negative 0.04 times. So those are just some of the issues to think about, the impacts for each of those options. Some other things to consider that, you know, the pay for performance provides structural adjustments, which means the board's stated goal is to get the authority to the 50th percentile, and canceling or deferring either delays or does not advance the structural migration of the compensation for the employees towards that 50th percentile. Second, another point to consider is that while the actual compensation during 2020 was beyond our budgeted outlays, there was no structural migration from this expenditure. So employees may have received extra funds as emergency pay, but it didn't move the needle in terms of where they are structurally. And then the cost containment that we undertook allowed us to continue operations and avoid other negative impacts to our employees that, you know, utilities, private utilities, for example, in the States, could not avoid. You know, there are organizations that furloughed employees or reduced work hours, which, you know, we did not do. And then, of course, we mentioned previously the rate stabilization fund. Any use of the potential rate stabilization fund to augment revenues to meet debt service coverage ratio, you know, we were thinking that might need to occur before fiscal year 21. And if we did pay for performance, then it would decrease from, for example, those funds, then it would decrease the amount we would have available for using the rate stabilization fund in the future years of 22 through 24. So it's a difficult issue that we're trying to navigate, and the issue is presented for the board's discussion to help enlighten management on how it might approach this.
Commissioner Santos.
Let's start with just the stabilization funds that we moved was 11 million.
11.6 is what was authorized.
We're just waiting for the rate thing to kind of decide how that all moves, right?
Well, we're waiting to see where we're going to land in terms of the debt service coverage ratio.
The dollar impact that you have shown us is about 500K?
Yeah.
Total.
Sorry, total.
And that applies to all employees?
Yes.
Okay, so, and those range from 1% to 4%.
So you can get a 0% if you're,
Basically, you're not going to
right. Yeah, we're not saying it's impossible, but what we are saying is, at this point, we're really close to the 1.25.
Right.
We hope that we do better, and we've been trying to control expenses so that we make sure that we do better and that we meet the targets. We'd like to be able to do everything, and, you know, if things work out at the end of the fiscal year, and when the numbers come in, if we have it, we certainly could do it, and if it we can still do it and keep us above, the 1.25, then, you know, just with our, not considering any other funding sources, then we should do it.
What are the uses of the rescue plan?
That part, we're still trying to figure the details out for that. But the other reserves, we have, there aren't the same type of restrictions associated with the 11.6.
And if you hold off this year, for example, like saying, okay, we know we owe the employees $500,000, continue to do pay for performance for 2021. It doesn't stop the process.
No, and so deferring it, we still have to put it on the books. It will still reflect negatively on the debt service coverage, even if we don't pay it out.
Okay.
You're required to disclose it.
You have to accrue it, right?
So
Okay. Go ahead.
I just, my intent and my goal would be to do right by the employees, but also show fiscal responsibility. And I think all the other things aside, if we stand at the end of fiscal year 2021 and look back at what we've been through in 2020, my position is that I think we did do right by the employees. We've done right by the employees up to this date. And if it's fiscally responsible for us to defer or to take a hit for 1 year because everybody took a hit for 1 year, then that, to me, if it's the right thing to do, I can stand behind that. But it still is a difficult decision.
Commissioner Mtako.
See, Miguel, it's comments like that that make me like you even more every day, because you're exactly right. You have to draw the line between being fiscally responsible and looking at the big picture. Like any private entity, you need to be able to reward your employees when you make money, and when it's lean, everybody's got to take the hit. And so, you know, the fact that you went through the effort to, propose the different, scenarios, option one is the right choice for me. And I think you've kind of alluded to, you believe that that's the right option as well. There's going to be times when the situation is going to be different, but for the foreseeable future, with tourism the way it is, and with really no kind of light at the end of the tunnel, you got to be smart with the money, and you got to make sure that you're in a position from a cash flow perspective as well to manage, because you really don't know what's coming down in 12 months. So
Okay.
you took out my thunder because you just said it, but good on you.
Okay. My thought is, we don't know what's going to happen. The part that scares me is your revenues are down, not necessarily because people stop paying. I think if I remember correctly, the number of people that owe us money that you've cut off already, it's not a big number, right? No, it's not a big number. But the KGAL sales have gone down. Hotels, all the business establishments.
Sales are down.
Sales are down. That's the problem, and there's no two ways around it. And I'm worried about what happens after the federal money runs out, because even after the PUA runs out, the people getting those monies, and even if they pull off the All Rise Act or whatever, it ends at some point. And even the recovery money, American Recovery Act or AR, I can't remember what it is, the acronyms anymore. But that will end at some point too. And I'd like to believe that it's coming back, but so we make some hard decisions. But we stand by our employees, and they still have a job. And to me, that's the important. Two things, okay? We have to continue service to the community, because there's no two ways about it. You are critical, essential. That's all there is to it. Two, we have to take care of employees, and we have to keep them employed, and they are keeping employed. So, you know, we see where we go in the future, and, you know, at that point, I don't know, it's a hard decision, and as a member of the CCU, I appreciate you looking at the problem and doing the analytical stuff that you did. You know, this is not easy. You're looking at it with open eyes, you know. I appreciate that. So, I don't know, we'll see where we go.
And I'm
And
sorry,
I support whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and what is your current, have you made a decision which you prefer?
Or you're just informing us, these are your
I'm
struggles
just at this point laying out the options.
and the struggles.
But you have not made a decision which
No,
option you?
no, management team has not made a decision. The management team has, arm wrestled over the options and then come together to try and present it with clarity, with enough clarity, to identify what the critical issues are and how any decision regarding the options would affect those.
So you want us to commiserate with you while you're making your management decision? Because at the end of the day,
No.
we're gonna approve a budget, right? And you're gonna fit the.
You have
At
to,
the end of the day,
I have to
we will
fit
make-
my, like I said, I have to fit my 36-inch gut into my 36-inch pants, but if my pants become 34 inches, I have some decisions to make, right? Yeah. And it is a tough call. If I can't fit in my pants, I gotta lose weight. That's the analogy.
either
So,
that or let the
right.
pants out.
Right. Well, but, to paraphrase it, it's hard to pump water out of an empty well.
Yeah.
Or a well that is not as, doesn't have the yield that it used to have, right? I mean, that's something you can appreciate, and,
Going back to the rescue plan, and only because we're also looking to get some money from the government. I know there's somewhere embedded in there about essential workers. Okay, and your amount of permitted use of the funds for essential workers. I mean, we're different, I do a hospital, but I think someone needs to help you get to that decision.
So the way that the act reads is
Right.
we're not including the definition of essential workers, utility workers, but if the governor, classifies us as essential workers, then
and when's
See, that, yeah,
We didn't, even when it came to the vaccinations, utility workers were never listed as essential employees. So we didn't,
and that kills me.
it also has to be low paid. It's supposed to help those, lower.
Yeah, and there's a different class there too, right? Like with that, premium day one? That was, I looked at that also. There's not too many healthcare workers that are in that category. But we don't qualify. Sorry, private equity doesn't qualify.
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah,
It's a tough call.
it's a tough call.
But we'll see, we'll make this decision, we'll know a lot more after early October when the PUC, when do we expect the PUC to make its decision? October, November?
We're waiting for the
Updated scheduling order.
data schedule that should come any minute.
they said it would get it to us this week, early this week. It's,
And,
Hoping November.
and then if the PUC agrees with our rate filing, this would be less of an issue, the pay for performance, whether to delay it or not?
I think it would be a non-issue for next fiscal year, but it's this fiscal year's decision that we're struggling with. And,
Think about it.
this is a little bit, it's been complicated by the fact that we now are not gonna have an answer on September 30th. And, the opposition has asked for December. We've said, no, that's too far. October, November should be reasonable. So we're waiting to hear back. Those are the guard posts, I think, on what the schedule's gonna look like, but it's still.
They're waiting for the ALJ to
But
come back.
you're not gonna get your tourism revenue, that's not gonna change,
Right.
Okay,
unless 4,000 Afghans start occupying hotels. You should see what's blowing up on some of the WhatsApp.
okay.
You never
Nothing
know.
else, Miguel?
You never know.
Nothing else, sir?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, very good. Thursday, right?
Second.
Today's Tuesday? Yeah.
Thursday.